sort of hoping that you'll kiss me goodbye.
Tonight, the death of a Hollywood legend, Katharine Hepburn. We'll take a look back at her life, her loves, the unforgettable roles that made America love her for all these years. Also, history in the making in the Middle East. Palestinian terrorists declare a ceasefire and Israel pulls its tanks. Will it hold? We'll take you there live. And 3 porches packed with partygoers collapse on one another like deadly dominoes. The rubble revealed several victims, mostly young people who never saw it coming. These stories and a lot more now on CNN Sunday Night. Good evening, I'm Martin Savage. We'll have more on the headlines from around the world in just a bit. But we wanted to start our show tonight with the woman who made such an impression on all of us with her movies, her style, her substance, her spunk. Tonight the world mourns the loss of Katharine Hepburn. Orson Welles called her the most mysterious person in Hollywood. For more than 60 years, she was pure gold on the silver screen. Her death today at age 96 marks the passing of one of the most unique acting talents the world has ever known. CNN's Bruce Burkhardt looks back on the breathless beauty that was Hepburn.
I'll play any part that appeals to me for $20. But I'll never, under any circumstances, play any part with which I don't feel a sincere congeniality.
1933. It was Katharine Hepburn's 3rd movie in Hollywood, Morning Glory, and it won her the first of her record 4 Oscars. In it, she portrays a naive but confident young actress who has no doubts about her future stardom.
You're talking to the greatest actress in the world, and I'm going to prove it.
Though she would later astound us with her range, this was typecasting.
Wait a minute, just watch me.
Here she was, this sort of very independent, strong woman striding around Hollywood in pants. And at the same time, she was, intensely feminine.
In a town where the pants in the family had always been worn by men, Katharine Hepburn, in her own charming way, took charge.
She's important, yes, as an actress, but her significance goes way beyond whether or not this performance was good or that performance was good and whether she was a good actress or not. She became the symbol of the modern woman who believed that she could do anything, that everything was possible.
Echoes of her legacy can be seen in the work that was done a little bit later by people like Jane Fonda, or some of Cher's roles, Sally Field, where you have women who go in and change the system or challenge the system. Katharine Hepburn helped to popularize that kind of woman as opposed to just the romantic or the passive woman.
Will you get off my running board?
This is my running board!
All right, honey, stay there.
Her independence, her feisty spirit, traits that she came by honestly. Born in 1907 in Hartford, Connecticut, she was one of 6 children in a well-to-do New England family. Her father, a doctor of urology, and her mother, a pioneering leader in women's rights, fighting for the vote and later for birth control. It was an unorthodox upbringing. Of Hepburn's mother, Life magazine wrote in 1939, Mrs. Thomas Norval Hepburn believes in the control of children before birth and nothing thereafter.
Your lover's arms stealing around you.
I'd like to see anybody try it.
Would you?
Oh!
Growing up with 3 older brothers, Hepburn was something of a tomboy, which may explain why her favorite movie was Little Women, in which she played the tomboy Joe March. But her childhood was not without tragedy. It was she who discovered her older brother hanging dead from a rafter, a suspected suicide, but the family always said it was a prank gone bad. Hepburn went on to graduate from Bryn Mawr in 1928, not a college known for turning out actresses. And this scene was America's first glimpse of Katharine Hepburn in the movie Bill of Divorcement. She went on to make another 42 movies, winning 4 Oscars and 12 nominations, playing a diverse range of characters, from co-starring with a leopard in Cary Grant in a movie that helped put the screwball into comedy, Bringing Up Baby.
Well, get behind me.
I am behind.
Well, get closer.
I can't get any closer. Now, you ready? Okay, calm. Left foot first.
All right.
To portraying an uptight minister's sister in African Queen.
I think probably the closest to what she actually was is the character she plays in The African Queen. There's a kind of clumsiness and vulnerability and incredible grace that Huston captured. He got her bravery, he got her courage, he got her hunger for experience.
But it wasn't all successes. The Hollywood Critics Association at one point called her box office poison, and there were complaints about her tinny voice. She lost the part of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind because producer David Selznick thought she lacked sex appeal. As usual, she fought back and bought the rights to the Philadelphia story so she could play the lead.
So I'm to be examined, undressed, and generally humiliated at 15 cents a copy. And you're loving it.
In an era when studio moguls controlled everything, Katharine Hepburn fought them tooth and nail, even negotiating her own contracts. But it was her next film, Woman of the Year, that proved to be the most pivotal of her life. It was in this film that she met Spencer Tracy. An intense love affair that her biographer believes had its roots in her brother's suicide.
And the rest of her life, if you look at it, she finds one man after another who needs her, men who are bent on destroying themselves, and that's, first of all, John Ford, and then probably most famously Spencer Tracy.
During their 27-year affair, Hepburn and Tracy made 9 films together, a perfect on-screen match that ended with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
And there is nothing, absolutely nothing, that your son feels for my daughter that I didn't feel for Christina.
Tracy, a Catholic, would not divorce his wife, and at the time their affair was kept relatively quiet. 2 weeks after finishing this film, Tracy died. Hepburn never watched the movie.
How dear of you to let me out of jail.
To deal with her grief, Hepburn immediately jumped into another project, co-starring with Peter O'Toole in The Lion in Winter. It won her a 3rd Oscar, with a 4th and final one still to come.
You know, Norman, you really are the sweetest man in the world. But I'm the only one who knows it.
On Golden Pond paired her with Henry Fonda. Amazingly, they had never met before this movie. 2 legends facing their own mortality, on screen and off. Hepburn claimed that death did not frighten her. Not much did.
I hope we never die!
So do I.
You think there's any chance of it?
Hepburn liked to tell people about her family's motto. She said her parents lived by it, and so did she. Listen to the Song of Life.
A short time ago, the family of Katharine Hepburn issued a short public statement about her death. It was followed by words of gratitude from the community where she lived her entire life.
Those of us who knew her well and loved her will miss her terribly. But through her films, generations to come will discover her humor and grace, her keen intelligence, and her soaring independence. She was and always will be an American original, and she died as she lived, with dignity and grace.
Katharine was prepared for it, and if you've read any of her books or heard any of her interviews, she wasn't afraid of it at all. I don't think Katharine was afraid of anything. She was a feisty, independent, glowing woman, and she was a friend to everybody.
Hepburn was also remembered for her generosity to Old Saybrook, Connecticut. She made numerous anonymous donations. We've now learned those include a fire engine and a park. And this note, Hepburn requested no memorial service. A private funeral will be held later. Now it's your turn. We'd like you to call us with your thoughts and memories of Katharine Hepburn. Our number is 1-800-807-2620. We'll play some of your remarks at the end of our program. Throughout the rest of the hour, we'll hear from people who observed Katharine Hepburn through the decades. But first, here's what she had to say about herself from the documentary All About Me.
Listen to me, mister. You're my knight in shining armor. Don't you forget it. You're going to get back on that horse. And I'm going to be right behind you, holding on tight. And away we're going to go, go, go. So, who is Katharine Hepburn? I worked hard to create that creature on the screen to make her fascinating and adorable. You were right, Dad. I'm still showing off, still enjoying it. But I agree, acting really is a minor accomplishment, certainly compared with being a doctor or a scientist. I've been around so long, though, that people treat me as some sort of oracle or grandmother of the world, maybe. Wanted to know what I think about the important things in life. Well, I think that just being alive is a tremendous opportunity. It's what you do with it that matters. And I know that work never hurt anyone. It's lack of it that destroys people. In some ways, I've lived my life as a man, made my own decisions. I've been as terrified as the next person, but you got to keep it going. You got to dream. Now, I don't know if there's an almighty, but I do know that you can't expect it to do all your work. We have to take matters into our own hands and use plain old common sense as our guide. My mother fought for women's rights and birth control. She believed that having children was a personal decision. So do I. There are already too many of us. Why make people have children they don't want? That's just not logical, is it? And love? Well, I'm lucky I've been loved and I've also been in love. There's a big difference. But people who want fame have to be loners. I always knew that I couldn't have it all. Marriage and a career, to my mind, do not go together easily. Now, to squash a rumor, no, I don't have Parkinson's. I inherited my shaking head from my grandfather Hepburn. I discovered that whiskey helps stop the shaking. Problem is, if you're not careful, it stops the rest of you too. My head just shakes, but I promise you, it ain't gonna fall off. And old age, what's the point of worrying about something you can't control? Just make the best of it and hope your body doesn't let you down. And I have no fear of death. Must be wonderful, like a long sleep. But let's face it, it's how you live that really counts. There's been a motto with my family for as long as I can remember. My parents lived by it, and so do I. And it says, listen to the song of life.
Let's look back again at Hepburn's career on the big screen. I'm joined now by David Sterrett. He's the film critic for the Christian Science Monitor. Nice to see you this time, David. Good to talk with you once more.
Good to be here.
A little bit of a movie association. I'm going to name you some movies here, and you tell me what it was that made that role unique for Katharine Hepburn. And we'll start with Guess Who's Coming to Dinner.
One of her later really major roles, a movie that had a lot of social impact. It's not a great film, I think. I think if we saw it now, a lot of it would seem kind of old-fashioned. But her last appearance with Tracy, both of them kind of elder statespersons of Hollywood at that point. They had a long, long association, and here they were playing dignified older people during this dignified older stage of their careers. I think the movie is probably remembered now at least as much for their performances as for the social message that it contained, which itself was pretty interesting at that period of American history.
Well, speaking of aging and movies, the next one, On Golden Pond, which by many accounts people think that was sort of her last major motion picture, last time we really saw her.
Yeah, and I think that's true. And it's really just the perfect example of something, or let's say the crowning example, of something that had happened over a period of many years. She aged in front of us. She didn't hide her aging. She didn't back away from aging. She wasn't like so many of today's older stars who get involved with plastic surgery and so forth, as of course a lot of our younger stars do too. She really let herself get older. She played older roles, and that was, again, the crowning achievement of that process. When she really appeared as an old woman, playing an old woman, and yet captivating everybody. The movie absolutely reached out and touched people's hearts in a way that really not many movies do.
Real quick, one more. One of my favorites, Philadelphia Story. This was a movie she literally took to heart.
Yeah, one of the things that she was really greatest at was comedy. And we have to remember, she was really versatile. She played in every kind of movie you can imagine, but she was sensational at comedy because she could do antic, zany stuff and at the same time keep that inner dignity that was always hers. And I think the Philadelphia Story is really popular, partly for that reason. In fact, largely for that reason.
I love that movie. David Sterrett, don't go anywhere. We will have you back a little bit later on to talk about the leading men in Katharine Hepburn's life, both on screen and off. So Hang with us, please. Thanks very much. We'll talk to you in a bit. You know, sparks flew when Hepburn shared the screen with many of her leading men, Bogart, Stewart, and, of course, Tracy. But the real love stories were behind the scenes, and not all of the men were screen idols. CNN's Darren Kagan has more on that.
Katharine Hepburn had many love affairs before she began her longtime romance with Spencer Tracy. However, she only married once, to Ludlow Ogden Smith. She called him Luddy. Hepburn insisted he change his name to S. Ogden Ludlow because she didn't want to be known as Kate Smith. Soon after they married, Hepburn's career took off, and she became romantically involved with Hollywood's top agent, Leland Hayward. Realizing the role of wife didn't suit her, she divorced Luddy in 1934. Hepburn's relationship with men often began on a combative note, not unlike her film characters. This was true of her rendezvous with director George Stevens, whom she met on the set of Alice Adams. While filming Mary of Scotland, Hepburn had a scandalous affair with the movie's director John Ford. At the same time, she was also courting Howard Hughes. They shared a passion for golf and film. It was Hughes who taught her how to pilot a plane. Hepburn cared deeply for her companions and often spent years with them. So much so that gossip at the time speculated she was actually married. But Hepburn vowed never to marry again.
And we'll have plenty more still ahead tonight, including a less famous side of Katharine Hepburn, her life on Broadway. But first, to look at the other headlines making news tonight, is the roadmap back on track? More militant groups call for a truce in the Middle East. And also 12 young people dead in Chicago from a porch collapse. What happened and why? But first, some images of Katharine Hepburn we will never forget. That movie. Just love it. Well, if you are just joining us, there is news tonight about a Hollywood legend who has passed. Four-time Academy Award winner Katharine Hepburn died today at her home in Connecticut. She was 96. Lauren Sidney takes a look back at the life and career of the First Lady of cinema.
You see, I was very sure of myself in those days.
Strong-willed, intelligent, independent. That's the image Katharine Hepburn projected in her acting career. Between the roles she played and the life she lived, she changed perceptions about what women could do and be.
All I'm trying to say is that there are lots of things that a man can do, and in society's eyes, it's all hunky-dory. A woman does the same thing, the same, mind you, and she's an outcast.
Finished?
No.
Hepburn's first success came on Broadway. By the early 1930s, Hollywood was courting her. But once she arrived, her unconventional behavior raised eyebrows. She was outspoken and wore slacks at a time when women didn't.
I've always lived my life exactly as I wanted. I've tried to please no one but me.
Hepburn won her first Academy Award in only her third movie, her 1933's Morning Glory.
You're talking to the greatest actress in the world, and I'm going to prove it to you. Now keep quiet, all of you, and you. You, just wait a minute, just watch me.
In 1936, she teamed for the first time with Cary Grant, a pairing that would yield the classic Bringing Up Baby a year later.
Oh, never hang on to a leopard's tail, Susan!
Her career had its ups and downs following that. She was rejected for the role of Scarlett O'Hara in Gone with the Wind. It was another sophisticated comedy with Grant that brought her back. In an unusual move for the time, she bought the rights to the Philadelphia story and chose the director and her leading men.
Dexter, would you mind doing something for me?
Anything, what?
Get the heck out of here.
He's waiting for you.
With Woman of the Year in 1942, she began a professional relationship with Spencer Tracy that later became personal.
I was sort of hoping that you'd kiss me goodbye.
Their on-screen chemistry in a series of groundbreaking comedies was unmistakable. But they kept their romance private. Hepburn stuck by Tracy, even though he refused to divorce his wife. Their ninth and last film together was Guess Who's Coming to Dinner in 1967. Tracy died 2 weeks after they finished filming. She won an Oscar for her work in that film and earned her third the following year for The Lion in Winter.
That's a mean and tawdry way to talk about your fiancé.
My fiancé.
Who's ever fiancé?
By then, her Parkinson's-like tremors were noticeable, but she continued working.
You are a pretty old dame, aren't you?
Oh.
What are you doing with a daddy or something that's like me?
Well, I haven't the vaguest idea.
And Golden Pond brought her an unprecedented fourth Academy Award, all of them in lead roles.
The trick in life is getting what you want, my dear.
Hepburn's final role came in Love Affair in 1994. The public's love affair with her through unforgettable films like The African Queen earned her this distinction: the American Film Institute's honor as Hollywood's greatest female screen legend.
And stick around, because we'll be hearing from you in about 20 minutes on your memories of Katharine Hepburn. It's our last call question tonight. Still ahead, he was the love of her life and the man she never married. Straight ahead, a look at Spencer Tracy and the other men Katharine Hepburn loved.
Don't you feel proud of yourself?
Certainly not. Look at the way you kept the engine going. Look at how you mended the propeller. It wasn't me at all. I don't think there's another man alive who could have done it.
Well, right you are, Rosie, because no other man alive's got you. I'll never forget the way you looked going over the falls. Head up, chin out, hair blowing in the wind. The living picture of a heroine.
Fancy me a heroine. Oh, Charlie, you've lost your mind.
Lost my heart, too. Shall we...
I'm joined again by David Sterrett. He is the film critic for the Christian Science Monitor for a look back at Katharine Hepburn's amazing career. And this time, David, we're talking about the men in her life, the leading men. And I was thinking that to share the screen with her must have been extremely difficult, and yet there were some men who did it very well.
Yeah, it's absolutely true. She did best with male performers who were just as strong as she was, who could command the screen as effortlessly as she did. In her best movies and in the best pairings, you never had a sense that somebody was merely partnering her, helping her look good, or that she was merely partnering somebody, making him look good. They were really equal pairings in those ideal cases. The legendary one, of course, and rightly so, was Spencer Tracy, but it went for several of the others, too, including, I think, Humphrey Bogart in The African Queen.
And then Cary Grant comes along. He's there at critical moments of her career, sort of helping to push her along.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, those two are well matched because they're both really good at comedy. They're both really good at being funny while maintaining a certain essential dignity that's always there. Also, they're both kind of patrician in their screen images. One of the things about Katharine Hepburn is that she always had that sense of being swell, you know, being a little bit above the fray, even if the role she was playing was very much part of the fray. And Cary Grant could do that too. He could do comedy or other kinds of moods, but there was always a sense that he was in control of situations. And I think that they shared that, and that's one of the reasons why they were another really good team.
And then, of course, there was the chemistry of Katharine Hepburn and Spencer Tracy. And this was something that you saw on screen, but then, of course, we came to realize it was also much more off-screen. And yet, at you know, this time in history, when social morals were the way they were, it was almost a scandalous thing, yet was tolerated by many.
Yes, it was. Katharine Hepburn actually got through that better than some others have done. Ingrid Bergman, for example, faced much more difficulties from the press and the public during a certain stage of her career. But in the case of Hepburn, she and Tracy were just in film after film. Most of them were really brilliant. Certainly the performances were always brilliant. They were a really well-matched team. They were well-matched physically, well-matched emotionally. They contrasted with each other, they complemented each other. So it was just one of those things that was kind of made in heaven. And I think that people appreciated the on-screen chemistry so much that rather than disapprove of what was going on off-screen, most people actually saw that as just an extension of the on-screen magic. So probably nothing else quite like it in American movies.
You think in many ways she laid the groundwork for women to follow on, especially in behind the scenes and dealing in what was then a man's world of movie making?
Yeah, absolutely. She's always been known as somebody who played by her own rules, somebody who didn't just follow the Hollywood fashions for the sake of doing so. She was famous for wearing trousers. She was famous for just kind of being casual and being herself under all circumstances. In many ways, I think she was a real kind of proto-feminist, somebody who was in the modern feminist movement before it even really existed. And that comes partly from family background, because her mother, of course, was somebody who really fought for women's rights, for the vote, and so forth. So, again, rather like her affair with Tracy, it was one of these things that she didn't make a big deal out of, that she didn't push. It was just there. People knew it, people appreciated it, people sensed it. It probably helped society evolve out of some of its more kind of backward and repressed attitudes of earlier in the 20th century. She was just kind of always a little bit ahead of the game, but again, never making a fuss over it, never making a big deal over it, just doing it in that easeful, graceful way that she had.
And I know I ask a lot here, but is there one particular movie that stands out as your personal favorite of hers?
Oh, gee, it's really hard to choose. Yeah. I guess I might choose not one of the Spencer Tracy movies, but maybe The African Queen. That's really the movie that kind of was the hinge going from the sort of young Hepburn into the older Hepburn. A difficult part to play in a movie that's both a comedy and an adventure movie, and in some ways a romantic drama. Her pairing with Bogart was really, the chemistry was really interesting and kind of complicated, and yet it always worked. So maybe I choose that one, but you know, ask me in 5 minutes and I might have another choice. There's just too many good ones.
We all have our favorites, and you're so right. David Sterrett, thank you very much, movie critic with the Christian Science Monitor. Thank you for hanging with us. It's been a pleasure talking with you tonight.
Thanks very much.
Still ahead, what Katharine Hepburn meant to those around her. One of her closest friends tells us why she was so special to him.
77 out to take one, Mark.
When the news got out that Katharine Hepburn died, dozens of people gathered near her home in Connecticut. Her life touched many. Earlier today, we spoke to one of her longtime friends, James Prideaux.
She was the one person I knew whose favorite word was fascinating. Everything was fascinating to Kate. She so embraced life. It was just wonderful. She was so exciting to know and wonderful to work with, I'll tell you.
I'm curious, was the person that we see on screen and came to know, is that
That's very
Katharine
much
Hepburn?
Yeah, that's very much Kate. Yes.
She was feisty, she was...
She said that it never seemed to work when she tried to play someone else like Clara Schumann or whoever.
Mm-hmm.
She said nobody ever believed I was Clara Schumann. She was always Kate Hepburn, you know?
And what was it that seemed to draw us to her? She was a magnet whenever she appeared on screen. You just were pulled in.
I can think of several things. Certainly her incredible face, her look, her carriage, not to mention the character that came right out. You know, it was all there. And I knew her so... She stayed at my house in Stone Ridge, New York, so many weekends. I knew her very, very well, even when we weren't making movies. And she was just always interested in everything.
Up next, the side of Katharine Hepburn that you might not know much about, and what Broadway is doing to remember her. The lights will dim on Broadway Tuesday night in tribute to the late Katharine Hepburn. Before she made her name on the big screen, Hepburn made a mark on the stage. Darren Kagan has more on that.
We know Katharine Hepburn as a movie star, but she was also a star on the stage, and that's where she began her career. In college, Hepburn's performance as Pandora in The Woman in the Moon helped the young actress get started. By 1932, she won the title role in The Warrior's Husband.
Charmed to meet you, Mr. Humphrey.
Katharine Hepburn was a huge success, and Hollywood took notice.
For the rest of the night.
Hepburn spent the rest of her career between plays and movies. After a string of bad films, her performance in the Broadway play The Philadelphia Story resurrected her movie career. She starred in the film version with rave reviews.
There's a library around.
Of all of Hepburn's Broadway shows, she only garnered 2 Tony nominations. One for her portrayal of Paris designer Coco Chanel in the musical Coco. The other Tony nomination in 1981 was for West Side Waltz. It was Katharine Hepburn's final stage appearance.
And with that, we end this edition of CNN Sunday Night. But as we go, we leave you the same way we started, and your thoughts and memories of silver screen legend Katharine Hepburn.
I am shocked this wonderful lady of acting is dead at 96. She was wonderful. I would truly miss her.
Not only in intellect and spirit and will, but in graciousness to all of her fans and everyone throughout the world, has attained what I call screen immortality.
Katharine Hepburn was an intelligent, beautiful, elegant actress. She gave me very many smiles and very many things to grow on.
Lucky to have been alive while she still walked this planet.
It's a legend that's going to be missed and something passing from our society.
I think that Katharine Hepburn was one of the greatest women of all time. I'm 14 years old. I have loved Katharine Hepburn ever since I was 11 years old. Watched all her movies.
Very sad day in all of our lives. She was a great actress, and I'd just like to say that she was a big inspiration to all of us in the acting business.
We will all miss her. I've watched all of her movies, as many as possible.
Truly a classic is gone. My first introduction to Katharine Hepburn was on Golden Pond. It just yet inspired me to go back and watch her movies, and truly she was the morning glory.
She was a great actress, a great American, and especially a great human being.
May her talent and her spirit be remembered for all time.